Well, thank you for the intro, Amanda. I will make one correction. I'm not one of the economists at NCAR. I'm the one and only. So I hope you're happy with our choice. You've had a choice of other airlines to fly with. I'm glad you took this one. So this presentation is based on some data analysis we've done with my postdoc, Amir Al-Sudani, and it's basically trying to enrich the voluntary metering program data set with all sorts of other variables, weather variables, spatially explicit for those fields, projections, using USGS data for each of the wells that have reported, soil series, crop data layer series, and that sort of stuff. As part of the quality control of these procedures, we do every other step, we do some regression analysis just to try to early detect if there's some relationships that don't quite make sense. Then we have gone in back to the data and make sure that it was correct. And in this case, actually, we found something that didn't conform to the expectations of what we read in the literature that the relation should be, and so we spent quite a while. Our suspicion was that we had messed up with the weather variable calculations when we were assigning going from the GIS data set to our data. And I'm sure Dr. Al-Sudani wanted me punch me in the face the many times that I sent him back. We ended up going back to Schenkler's database, checked his code, which of course was correct. We just came across something. So I'm going to talk, I think what we found is a level of mismanagement of crop heat stress with water. We think we have evidence that farmers try to reduce heat stress with additional moisture. The pet project name for this project is Hot Farmer Wet Crops. We don't use that for any announcements because it's, it may rub people the wrong way. I'm happy that I got people who can answer the questions about this effect here. I'm gonna limit my presentations as much as I can and my answers to the economic side of it. And I may ask Dr. Chastain to step in and explain what I'm trying to say. Good luck. So how do I, okay. So just quickly, background on the area where we are at. The first message, and this is what I use to convince people outside of here that keep telling me, why don't you dummies learn the lessons we've learned from the waters of the West? And I try to tell them it's a completely different situation, a completely different reality, and a completely different future. So in the West, the reality that they face is that they are mining water essentially, and the question is, what's the optimal rate of mining that water, and what are the best allocations for those mined, so to speak, resources? Do we curtail ag water so you can be using industrial or municipal, that type of thing? Those are the type of questions that they're dealing with. And you see the effect of those receding aquifers on the map on the left of your screen. Those brown spots are counties that have receding irrigated acreage. So this pretty much correlates. You have a depleting aquifer, you're going to have a reduction in the aquifer. In contrast, those blue spots are counties that have seen increases in irrigated acreage. And without having to put a GIS map of water and precipitation, you can see the irrigated acreage is expanding where water is more abundant, even though it might be in the off season. So our future is quite different. You're seeing a future here that in our region, the future is one of greater water use. And so that makes a big difference. The big red flag alert waving the cones at you is if you look at some counties in Arkansas that shares that are on the same MERVA that we are, you are starting to see counties that are seeing receding irrigated acreage. So this is a cautionary picture here. If we want to learn from what we have learned west, even if west is west of the Mississippi in Arkansas, we may not be able to, I guess I'm just saying we need to think about things a little bit different and ahead of where we are. Marginal thinking probably not going to solve our problems. The MERVA is already the aquifer with the highest level of withdrawal for irrigation. I talked to my colleagues, water economics is dominated in the West. Water economists tend to study the West and they tend to study Ogallala. The reason for that is data. Kansas has something called WIMAS, which is all the wells mandatory reporting, the reported water use, what crops they use it on, what system they use to deliver irrigation and whatnot. And that has the advantage that it attracts high level, all levels of scientists. It attracts attention of very smart people who can analyze that. I argue with my colleagues that in terms of agricultural economics, agricultural water in particular, the MERVA is already of higher importance, given that it accounts for higher withdrawals than the High Plains aquifer. To start getting into topics, as this is a multidisciplinary agricultural science group, I want to just put this seed in your fertile minds of what economics is. I do understand that when you do your controlled experiments on the field, what you want from the economists is to give you the production cost, and is there going to be a problem? And that's part of it. That's more like accounting than economics. Economics, to give you just a sense of how we think and what we do, we study behavioral responses to incentives. Okay? That incentives oftentimes comes in the forms of money, subsidies, taxes, etc. But preferences are a weird thing. We may choose a car that is more expensive just because, your behind feels better on that seat. Who knows? So, but basically, what we like to deal with is how do individuals deal with trade-offs. This management practice is more costly, but it's easier on me. Maybe my main reason to adopt a practice is that, man, it allows me to go hunting at 4 p.m. I don't know. So that's economics. Economists don't know much about anything. So we tend to oversimplify things, and we're just curious about how people do things. So here is the simple mind of an economist laying down the basic farmer decision chain. So in our mind, there's some sort of pre-season in which what the farmers do is try to get ahead so that management of their production cycle next time around is as easy and least problematic as possible. At some point, they decide that what crop to plant. Sometimes they have a backup, so if they can plant corn, they'll go soybean because of rain or whatever. And then they do plant fertility and just get the crops on the ground. And up to that point, what they're aiming for is maximum yield. So basically, I want to put myself in a spot that I can get the most out of my fields that I can. And then, some other things you have to watch for pathologies, other things, but then comes basically irrigation management and making sure the plant is getting the care that it needs. And at that point, the mindset changes a little bit. They're no longer inputting things to achieve that maximum yield. They are already kind of aiming for that. And with irrigation, what they're trying to do is to avoid any takedown. They're trying to minimize the amount of yield losses at that point. And then hopefully, as a consequence, you'll have high yields and higher profits. Okay. In terms of the economics of irrigation, that exactly doesn't pan out, because if you achieve max yield with your irrigation, but by definition, that implies not maximum profits, which is a topic for a different talk. But this is kind of the mindset, and I'm just talking about this to explain our identification strategy in the econometric model. And so basically the identification strategy, what it seeks is that when we do this regression analysis, we control for all other factors that may be confounding the variable that we are interested in. For example, in temperature, that's a tricky one because that affects everything. That has an effect on a direct effect on the and I'm gonna say the wrong terms here, but it affects the crop on how much it's gonna produce biomass and yield and everything. It affects the crop water requirement. It affects the soil moisture content of the soils. So it has a multi impact in there. So we needed to look into how we control for temperature related variables that will help us isolate the effect of extreme heat. What is our Y variable? What's our dependent variable? Basically, that's the reported amount pumped from each of these voluntary wells. So that's our unit of analysis. What else do we need to take into consideration for that? Well, and this is the reason we are studying this data. Ultimately, what we want to know is how sensitive the farmers are to the increasing cost induced by the depletion of the aquifer. So pumping cost is an important factor to control. And so we have because the prices enter in the pumping cost as a linear component, the main factor that affects it is the depth to water. So in this case, we use the depth to water, which we have extrapolated from monitoring wells for each of the years that we have reporting data for. And then a bunch of other variables, like I said, crops and climatic variables. And so when we couldn't find any mistakes on our data, we started, we looked into the literature of what could explain this. So we learned, could you remove that top of that? I don't know. If you tell me how, maybe I could. Click what?
In the screen, just that way. That can reveal. Oh no.
No,
okay.
so it's under more.
More.
Video thing home. Floating meeting controls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more.
More.
Down.
Down.
Down. One more there.
This.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
We have Zoom experts here.
So we look into plant physiology paper. We weren't looking. We just ended up doing scholar searches on the topics. The papers ended up being from plant physiologists, and what we see there is that there's even in research. There's a lot of confounding between the effects of heat stress and moisture stress and water stress. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of dryland corn that catches attention on these effects, and heat stress and moisture stress tend to correlate with each other in dryland. And reading deeper into that, we kind of found that they are separate and the time is not quite the same. The other piece is, okay, how does that go into the farmer's mind in that diagram of effects that he makes the irrigation decision? So we were searching, so how would he know when these effects? And so it started with more or less informal conversation with farmers around here and our own farm crew, that around here when farmers see a soybean leaf flipping or a corn leaf twirling, it's oftentimes interpreted as a thirsty plant needing water. And so what we found in the literature is that this is just to show that the misconception that these two grow together pans out in dryland. They correlate. As you have a period of drier time, you have a period of drier soils, essentially. And the paper that I understood the best, I guess, I don't know if it's the best paper, just the one that the language was easier for me to understand, is by Dr. Carter out of Cornell. And basically what in a series of paper, what she's saying is that even heat stress is not much that you can do. First, if your soil moisture content is adequate, additional water is not going to help you further with the heat stress, right? And these effects are separate. There is a lag between when you start having these extreme heat days as to when you start having moisture stress. In fact, on extreme stress, extreme heat days, actually the water uptake diminishes and she was talking about corn in the convent. I assume that behaves similarly.
Can you repeat the last sentence?
On the extreme heat days, the plants actually uptake less water than like growing degree days, like and in fact she says, actually that's what she said, that when she explained, actually it was a paper from 1967 that explained it. I forgot, it was a Japanese sounding last name, I should have had it there. But he was saying that that's actually the mechanism. It gives the side of the leaf that's gonna, it's kind of created shade for itself, the plant, I guess, when it's
the underside.
Yeah.
On soybean, the silvering, it's more reflective.
Yeah.
So you're decreasing.
Yeah.
Input.
Yeah, and they say all of this is essentially kind of like the plant creating a kind of a shape for itself. So, and so that is telling us, so growing degree days, if we have a variable that captures the ideal growing days, that variable should correlate positively with irrigation pumping if the irrigation is managed accordingly. And for extreme days, it should, if anything, should be less, should be negative. So it's kind of a curve effect on temperature to water type of thing in my math mind. And so we try to control for that in the formulation to check if that is what's going on with their data. As I said, this is even confounded in research, and all of the extension bulletins that I've seen, pretty much the extension agents do say, if you see these things, put more water. And then we see exactly the opposite relationship. So we see if these farmers over these 4 years of data have seen more growing degree days, meaning the plant would have needed more water, they would have applied less water. And if they've seen more extreme heat days, they would apply even more water. So it's telling us that for the evidence is that the farmers associate these extreme hot days with, I'm not gonna say they think the plant needs more water, but somehow they believe it helps with the heat, with the heat stress. And so the next step is to quantify how much water and money is this mismanagement costing, and that's our, well, this is the full table of, well, not the full, the main variables to control. So one of the variables we have to control, for example, if it's used for these high water use applications, because the permits turn up, they are additive. So if you have, okay, I have a permit that allows me to do rice, soybean rotation with wildlife management, all of these permits kind of stack up the amount of water you can use on that land. So we had to control for those extreme water uses. The way we control for the natural demand of water is we use the evapotranspiration series for each of the seasons. Of course, we control for precipitation and for in-season precipitation and depth to water the up in that well, because that's we need to control for that pumping cost aspect to it. And and then we have the high heat. We calculated degree days about 32 Celsius. Different crops have different points at which they start having that, and 32 was the highest. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't confound that. It was really high heat days. So that's the regression results we have. We had permitted field and year fixed effects. So we're controlling for all unobserved variables that are common to all farmers in a given year and common to a given field across time. So two-way fixed effects. And this is our estimate of how much this mismanagement. This is a lower bound estimate. This is essentially bringing the coefficients for growing degree days and extreme heat, extreme degree days to zero essentially. So this is a lower bound of what the cost is. So we're talking about over 500,000 acre feet per year in terms of water. So this is extrapolated to all the wells, to all the permitted wells, and not just the 4,000. And the cost in excess pumping per year across the delta is at least $25 million. And if we build in how much NRCS is spending on the amount of water they think they conserve with their programs, that's an additional $15 million, bringing the total amount of excess water used for high heat to $40 million. And this is a lower bound given this back of envelope calculation, which is not, given our economy is not huge, but it's not nothing either. I mean, it's a very sizable piece. Then the next question is how to deal with the problem. Well, I guess we're get a room half full of ARS folks to help us deal with that. Now, Dr. Carter out of Cornell, what she's saying in her experiments is that the basic yield penalty derived from the heat, the extreme heat, is due to faster maturity. Furthermore, she says the extreme heat during the day does not really impact, does not have a yield impact. And this is for corn, I'm sorry. This is for corn. She says the daytime extreme heat does not have a yield impact that she can identify, but nighttime extreme heat does. And the way it affects, it causes a yield penalty, according to Dr. Carter, is that it speeds up maturation of the crop. So she's saying a better way to, if we are expecting a season of extreme heat, the better way to deal with that is with slower maturing varieties. That's her. She hasn't tested that, but that's her best guess on how to best manage that. In terms of what can we say about farm level management of these things? Well, one of the indicators is, and as I said, eventually your soil moisture is going to catch up to your dry environment. And one telltale sign that you're approaching a level of moisture stress that's going to affect you is when the canopy and air temperature invert. So in an extreme heat days without soil moisture, your air temperature is higher than your canopy temperature. Once the crops start to experience, this is all Dr. Carter, I'm not saying this. I know you all know about this more than I do. So what she says is at the point where water starts being an issue, the canopy temperature is going to be above air temperature. So maybe instead of a visual cue of, well, you know, after a few days of extreme heat, it's a matter of taking canopy temperature. Is it above or below air temperature? And well, at that point, trigger. Ideally, everybody will have Drews on speed dial and check at the soil moisture sensors, but we know that adoption is not quite there yet. But as a rule of thumb, a way to get the farmer into the right mindset, maybe we can all say something about, and I don't know if you stick thermometers in the corn behind or feet. I don't know how you measure those temperatures, but maybe there's some cheap, relatively easy way to help us or help these farmers trigger the irrigation in better ways. There's also, and asking around about this, actually to Dr. Delholm, say, well, the guana does that. It does have the soil moisture, air temperature, and canopy temperature, and so a dashboard like that, I think would if you had a question about this, we got Drew here, can explain it probably. That'll be a more water conscious type of dashboard. And that's just a joke for economists, so if you don't get it, it's fine, but I'll open up for questions at this point. So I think I'm more or less on time now.
The paper you're thinking about is probably IDSO, IDSO.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, very cool.
Not at once.
Question.
Do we have, how do I see here if we got a chat?
I would say depending on the crop, you can't really separate heat and drought stress. They,
Oh, there's a down sheet. Sure.
Cool work. Thank you, Joe.
That's nice, man. Cool.
Oh, hot.
Yes.
you independently came to the topic of my dissertation through economics, which is freaking awesome.
Man, I'll gladly take a second PhD if you give it to me.
It's very, very exciting to watch. But
I'm glad that there's some supporting evidence. But as I said, this was started as a quality control procedure, and we stumbled across what seems to be a real
tell this story because it's literally what I did for my dissertation. So,
cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, as he said, separating out heat and drought stress is a very, very difficult thing because all the secondary metabolites which forms when heat stress is there, drought stress is there, will be 99% same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and like I said, we're not identifying the separate effects here. What we identify is we quantify the minimum excess water being used to try to deal with it.
and having said that, I don't believe what somebody said, heat has no relation with the yield.
They did say it does.
Yeah.
It depends on how you frame that.
Every crop has cardinal temperatures. There's a minimum above which the plant physiological process starts. Okay, there's a maximum where the optimum. Okay, optimum. Then maximum where everything dies. So within that,
Is this the one you
profound influence. It's not small influence. Heat has a profound influence.
And heat within a canopy is a different animal as well. So I mean,
I'm sure. That's for you guys. But is this what you were talking about?
There was no evidence of direct negative impact. Oh no, this is
Yeah, I mean, that could be a cool comment paper. You can send it.
Because I took advanced courses in plant stress physiology.
Like I said, I mean, if
So-
you can correct that, I mean, it'll be a cool, quick paper for you.
Yeah.
I'd have to see the context, because within reason, I would say, okay, but there are
There was a
caveats.
citation.
We'll say there are caveats to that.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
I know she knows.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm aware of her, so I know she knows it.
What is the location? Air temperature at a particular place, depends on the climate and the soil. The location, is it in the north or south?
The what, the lab, which
I
we
mean,
did
this-
the experiment,
This experiment, because if you go to north,
Cornell,
Cornell.
the lab is there. The conditions in which the lab was set, I bet it's reported there.
Because air temperature alone does not what do you call dictate the canopy temperature. It's the energy balance because leaf is exposed to sunlight.
Mhm,
Air is only one factor.
mhm,
Air temperature is only one factor.
mhm.
So it's the energy balance. That's why you see that in one of your picture, leaves turning.
Mhm.
That's for reducing the light amount of load of radiation.
Yeah.
To avoid that, it could. Okay, then there is another type of curd. Once drought hits the crop and it dries, that is another curd. It's wrong.
It's the same curl though.
Yeah.
It's the same mechanism that causes the curl. The reason you see it under heat stress is because plant hydraulic conductance underpaces the evaporative demand.
Mhm.
And that's when you start seeing.
So let me ask you this, what you're saying.
But you are a brave man.
No, I want to understand because I mean, the paper's not there because I don't have all the, Joe's asking for an explanation for Guana for after this question, but to get this straight, are you saying that there may not be a lag between heat and moisture stress?
No, heat and moisture is always there. But delineating, see, just by looking at the crop in the field, the leaves curling.
Yeah.
Okay, that can be,
Yeah, I got that. So
Radiation
the curling can be a signal of
radiation
stress.
stress,
The question is there a lag between you see the extreme heat as when you, and like I said, on dry land, that's what's going on, but this lag between heat stress and moisture stress, do you agree that it exists or not in all cases?
Heat stress and moisture stress is confounding. You can't separate out very difficult.
You can't separate it,
You can separate out if canopy temperature is.
but you can have water stress without heat stress, no?
Yes.
So you could separate it, right? I'm just asking, I don't know.
They tend to be confounded during.
Well, yeah, that's clear that's being confounded, but so we'll talk more in the office in the interest of the online audience. Drew, if you could explain Guana dashboard. I've done enough hand waving here.
So the top graph is going to be your moisture. That's the volumetric sensor data, and it shows the daily water use consumption going down. And then the bottom one is the canopy temperature. That's accumulating temperature over those days, and that's what that stack up is. And the idea is as number of hours of accumulating that temperature before it hits that top dash line is when you're going to need to rewater. And then the blue line is going to be the canopy temperature. Right, and then the green is the the green line is the canopy temperature, and where's the ambient temperature? The blue line is the ambient temperature, and so that's what we were talking about with when the canopy temperature is higher than the ambient temperature, and so you can see is the ambient temperature outside, and here's the crop temperature, and so I think the number of hours accumulating over the canopy temperature over that temperature threshold of this red line is accumulating over these days. And so the number of hours that they've done within their research that shows that you need to irrigate based on the canopy temperature. And this doesn't have a good example, but if you had the green the green canopy temperature higher than the blue ambient temperatures when you have that inversion
Yeah.
of where your
And I guess, and Zach, you raised your hand, one more comment, the related literature that we found when we were looking at these is kind of the sort of deficit irrigation literature that further argues that you can incur into stone water deficit before you start actually seeing yield penalties. So you'll see a lot of studies that have tried to find that sweet spot in which you can be just below the just slight water stress in which you still don't have a yield penalty. So I tend to believe that there's room for further water savings with with the appropriate indicators and triggers. I thought you raised your hand.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the yield penalty. Is that like, at least for a crop like corn, is that why there's an emphasis on planting as early as possible here? Is to avoid that yield penalty? Is that the nighttime heat stress? Is that what that is?
I'm not really familiar with corn, somebody's calling me. Let me think about that.
You could squeeze it
But I think a lot of the reason we plant corn is because you can't plant corn. It'll tolerate the cooler season earlier on. It's the crop we have, but I'm sure that plays into it.
Sure.
He's probably the better answer for that question.
I shared more with Andrea on the phone the other day, but pollination timing has a lot to do with it. Pollinating in early June, you're just less likely to be, because you're not getting into transpiration types and water demand things. We're talking about the physiological process of pollen shed and silk growth and all.
Yeah.
And those have their own temperature sensitivities, and it's known to be highly temperature sensitive. So if you're early June, that being the most yield affecting stage, that has to do with it. There are insect and pest reasons.
So is that, I feel like one of the conclusions from Nico's work is that maybe there's an interest in going towards a slower maturing variety. Does that interfere with that though?
No, that's her best guess, I guess.
No.
And we're currently testing that right now in my study. We have assortment of maturity, so that's cool, especially in the hot year.
For cotton.
Yeah, for cotton. I know a lot more about cotton. I know that if the floral tissue or the pollen tube itself breaks 35 Celsius, it stops elongating. So that's the weak link in cotton. If the tissue itself gets over 35, then you're out. But it rarely happens. It has to be a drought heat stress component. Like it has to be both of them, because cotton's has like a limited homeothermy. The tissue will typically stay between 28 and 32 Celsius. And you have a hell of a time getting it to respond to temperature. Because in cotton, stomatoclosure is almost entirely hormonally controlled. Crops like corn or soybean, whenever they get into a situation where it's too hot and too dry, evaporative demand outpaces plant hydraulic conductance, and so you lose turn and you start to see that curling. It's just a physical thing. It's just a fact of it's the cells themselves are losing moisture, and it causes the plant curling. And it's an energy input reduction strategy is the way I would say it. But in cotton, you don't see heat stress without drought stress. It has to be together, and I don't know what corn does.
We're already planting some of the longest maturities available on the market, and we're planting them as early as soil temperatures will allow. And also growers are aiming for a early delivery price premium for like end of July delivery. So, and then we have all the avoiding pollination, heat stress, avoiding bugs. So everything kind of promotes early planting of corn already. So
And
were you thinking for
Darryl,
corn or a different crop?
I'm sorry. So you're saying for cotton, they do go together.
Almost always, you can't.
So I should,
You should check out Chastain et al. 2016.
what's the Twitter thing?
Cotton.
TLDR.
Yeah, TLDR.
TLDR, too long didn't read.
Yeah.
So I should, as I have these special uses, maybe I should control for cotton crop just to clean up the
Yeah.
coefficient harder.
Yeah, see what it does.
That relates to another question I had. So in this regression here, the largest coefficients by far are well used wildlife habitat, well used for fish culture. I was wondering if you would see, and also share filtered rice, if you would see something different if you separated data out by the crop.
So some of these are joined. That's why I'm controlling for it. So because our dependent variable is total amount pumped, I want to control for all of those special cases. And so I had shares by each of the crops, share of soybean, cotton, corn, share of the permitted field that's been planted with it. So I didn't really add much and just kind of took away degrees of freedom, and so we kept it clean with these special issues that are clearly will require bunches of additional water.
Yeah, in the same, you see like coefficient for precipitation and temperature is pretty low. That means maybe this impact. So I will try to line the relationship between precipitation and.
It's a huge impact. I mean, it's undeniable power. I mean, it's of the magnitude. I mean, yeah, you do that times however many millimeters, however many millimeters of rain. I mean, it adds up, but it's clear. Less rain, more irrigation, for sure.
Did you look much at nighttime temperature? That's what I'm fascinated.
I just use degree days.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with nighttime temperature right now.
Man, one of the things is we are not great at dealing with GIS data, and all of the weather variables are GIS based, and then we have to calculate stuff on top of these observations, and so it just takes a long time for us to process. Now you have the ability to, if I give you the locations of the fields to give me that separating to day nighttime.
Yeah,
this is be great because that's the theory, right? That's the hypothesis,
yeah,
that it's a nighttime.
I think that's what's driving yield losses right now. And
well, this one doesn't have yields in it, but if we have yield data and we can apply this type of regression analysis to that, we could identify that effect if we could come out with that data.
It's a really interesting concept because it basically respiration responds to temperature. There's a known relationship. So higher the temperature, the higher respiration rates. Overnight, you're repairing all of this heat and drought damage, all this photo inhibition that's come. You have elevated respiration, so you're burning all that sugar that you created throughout the day, and that's not going into your yield. Furthermore, you do lose water at night. There is transpiration at night. So inherently, as you raise the temperature at nighttime, you are decreasing your water use efficiency, you're decreasing your water productivity, and you're hurting your yield as well. And even furthermore, that heat stress, they don't catch up. They can't quite fix all the damage. So your photosynthetic rates midday are even reduced further. I think it's all nighttime. I think that's the key that we need to get really into and look.
That's what she's and she did. So her lab is in Cornell, but the area of that she was replicating the Corn Belt. So
yeah,
I don't think she was doing. I mean, I don't know how much corn there is around Cornell, but I think she was talking about conditions in the Corn Belt. But that's what she could say about.
There's a bunch of us barking up that tree right now. We're all going nighttime, but it's exciting stuff.
Anyhow, but yeah, it sounds like, I mean, if you can come out with those data with yield, maybe across, we could do some interest. I'll be happy to be the trading author on that one. Any questions from online before we wrap it up? I think we're 10 minutes ahead of schedule and hopefully under budget. Any other takers in the room?
Well, just a quick comment. Because irrigation management is done on a sub-weekly time frame, and your precipitation and evapotranspiration are done over the May, June, July, August, like a 4-month seasonal period. Obviously, because of the limitations of the data set being annual pumping, right? We don't have the temporal distribution of that. I guess what I'm trying to say is it would be fascinating if future analyses and maybe part of the CIG instead, like if we could get to the seasonal distribution of that water, like breaking down, going back to what Daryl was talking about, like, because you might have maybe the best way to say is you might have seasonally a low evapotranspiration from a reference evapotranspiration. I'm assuming that's what it is. But then the days where we're making irrigation decisions, that might have a high, and so it might show up as a high heat stress day, but not necessarily at being conveyed in that coefficient for evapotranspiration.
The only issue I see with, that's ideal. That we can do a lot of high frequency data analysis with that set up. Now, farmers report their meter, once or twice a year. So that limits your unit of analysis, your temporal unit of analysis limited by that. And building in any more specificity than what the variable of interest is giving you, you're just kidding yourself about the level of precision you.
Sure.
Unless I guess you could come up with some index, is this uniform season, or that type of some type of Gini type of index of uniformity of the season versus peaky season, or that could be applied.
Or I was offering some sort of simulation based estimate of evapor demand.
But what that would be missing is your farmer response.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you can simulate the evaporative demand or the crop water so-called requirement as a control, like
the Gruana thing that predicts when it's going to need. Is that what you're saying?
Doesn't matter. It could be some sort of mathematical model based on weather.
Algorithm that predicts you're going to run out of water.
But what I'm trying to say is if we can kind of control for when, the weather and the crop might think we need water, then maybe we can tease out the grower's decision effect. If that makes any sense.
The only thing missing there would be the grower decision, but everything else could be, if we have that high frequency data, it's a lot of cool stuff we can do with it. So, all right. Let me free up people, and we can continue talking here. This is the point that we continue talking, but I did ask the people on Zoom if they have any questions. I don't see any. Lindsay, thank you. You're welcome. And I hope to see you next time. So I'm gonna stop the Zoom now. And those who want to stay in the room and chat further, let's do so. I didn't put my phone number or email there, but you know where to find me, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Thank y'all. Good job.